Good morning, Mercy. Thank you so much for joining us for Mercy Online. Thank you for being here today. If you have any questions about Mercy, if you have interest in volunteering, if you need prayer for anything, I want to point you to the Connect card that's linked right there in the chat. You can please fill that out now and you can get connected to us and we can get connected to you. So please fill out the Connect card. And also each Sunday we invite you to make an offering to God as an act of worship. And we want to thank you for giving generously. You can give right now through the link in the chat as well, or go to the mercyvineyard.org website or through the Mercy app, which you should download, by the way. It's a really cool app. And now, let's welcome up Scott Whitmore for Sunday's message as he continues a new sermon series about the sounds of summer. Thank you.
Good morning, Mercy Vineyard. My name is Scott Whitmore, and I'm delighted to be with you today. You probably know my wife. She's our director of worship. She's up front all the time. I'm not. I'm sometimes in the back, oftentimes with our kids, but it's just good to be up front with you. My wife and I have been attending Mercy for 17 years. That's not the complete life of the church, but it has been a vast majority of it. And this is the first time I get to preach to you, so it's just kind of a fun morning and fun time for me to be with you today. I suppose 4 years ago, I gave a talk or a sermon on some kind of life-changing stuff that happened inside of Mercy, but this is the first time that I'm actually bringing the gospel and presenting to you or talking with you this morning. So it's good to be with you. When Gary started this summer series, Songs of Summer, he said, Scott, pick a song and preach on it. Pick a song and preach on it. Okay, that's not huge. What a wide open topic. So I processed through my catalog of songs and thought, well, what if we start with my favorite genre? And knowing the urban clientele that we have here at Mercy that are watching this morning, perhaps some of you have heard of my genre, perhaps, but let's just try. Play with me if you will here. Anybody, raise your hand while you're at home. You can raise your hand, write it down, note it. Has anybody heard of the song Dirt Road Anthem? Anybody? Jason Aldean? You're chilling on a dirt road, laid back, swerving like you're George Jones. No, okay. How about Cruise? Anybody heard the song Cruise by Florida Georgia Line? Baby, you're a song, you make me want to roll my windows down and cruise. Nobody, okay. Barefoot Blue Jean Night by Jake Owen? Nobody there either. How about Fancy Like? Please let me know if you have heard the song Fancy Like by Walker Hayes. Song goes, fancy like Applebee's on a date night. Got that Bourbon Street steak with my Oreo shake. Got some whipped cream on the top two. 2 straws, 1 check. Girl, I got you. Anybody heard that one? Please let me know. When I did that, when I did the demo to this sermon with 6 people, 1 person had heard that. Please. Country, anybody? COU, country, my favorite genre. No, that's not well represented here, so I thought I'd bring it back. Okay, so I thought of my favorite genre. And then thought, that's not going to fly. Probably not a lot of folks know country here. Maybe some, probably not a lot. I mean, maybe that last song, Fancy Like, because that's my favorite restaurant, Applebee's, anybody? Maybe fit that in somehow. 2 for $20, half-price appetizers. Nah, I don't think so. So let's pass on that. Perhaps you're then thinking, boy, I bet that's one musical family. Well, let me tell you, Amy got all the musical talent. This boy got not a lot. I mean, my mom thinks I sing like Andrea Bocelli. No, I really don't. So no, I'm not gonna be singing for you. What you got there, you got a little bit of like country flow. That's the max you're gonna get from any sort of like singing from me today. Needless to say, I won't be singing for you. Let's talk about this. Do you remember the first music you ever received as a gift? Your first gifted music. The first song you either downloaded, the first gifted CD, your first cassette tape, or maybe even a record that you were given. My first experience was a cassette tape. The story I'm about to say may or may not actually be the one in reality, but it's the one I remember as the first piece of music that was given to me. Remember cassette tapes? You could rewind it by putting your fingers in the middle, and then you can manually move that cassette forward or the tape forward or backwards. I remember an early birthday party. I think elementary school. I don't think it was middle school. It was a birthday party with my family, where all my family was there. My aunt and uncle gave me this square wrapping, and of course I knew at that time what the gift was going to be. I mean, I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew it was a cassette tape. And I was so excited to open it. So I opened this gift, I turned it around, read it out loud, and my mom immediately grabbed it and said, "Ah," and started running away. I have this picture in my mind. I think it's reality. I have this picture in my mind where my uncle, who had just given this to me, stands up, starts laughing and chasing to grab that cassette tape and say, "That's not for you, Sharon, that's for your son, Scott," and he gives it back to me. It maybe was a bit edgy at the time, not really. Perhaps it was, at least to me and my music ears. This picture that you're gonna see here is a picture of that cassette tape. Anybody remember Petra? Anybody? Christian rock? I couldn't repeat a song from that cassette, but I do remember it being one of my first prized articles of music. And I'll say that Christian music has had a drastic impact on my life. It's brought me peace, righteousness, celebration, joy. It has filled my life up. Even though I'm not musical, I love music. And like my thought and how I've loved music may not link to that specific cassette, but it certainly links back to my parents, bringing in and supporting worship music or Christian music in our home. While Petra was Christian, our home did have all the time Christian music playing through, and it was a deep part of who I was. And can I tell you that, like, as I've gotten older and had kids, I have four children. All of them have been raised here at Mercy. My oldest will be turning 13, my youngest is 7. All of them have been here, part of that life journey of Amy and I being at Mercy. But one of the most nerve-wracking, that's maybe not the right way of saying it, maybe one of the most like, okay, God, I'm actually trusting you things I've done in my life, is when I gave a device, my first device, when you give the first device to my child. And you go, "Here you go, child, here's the world at your fingertips. No big deal. Hopefully, Lord willing, thousands of prayers and the millions of minutes of examples, millions, like 5.5 million, I did the math, minutes of examples of how to follow the Lord and make the best decisions actually have an impact on your child when you give them a device and say, here's the internet." So we did this to my son. We gave my son a Kindle, and one of the first apps that my son downloaded after we gave him this Kindle was Spotify. Okay, here you go. Here are a whole bunch of lyrics. Here's a whole bunch of music. What's going to happen? Soon after he received it, he downloaded the Spotify, and he said, Dad, come on. You have to hear this song. Come on, come check it out. You have to hear this song. Me, because this is how I often operate at night. It's too late. It's really late. I'm really tired. My body's shutting down. I'm a morning person. I'm not a night person. It's like 8:15 at night. No kidding. It's really late. And I need to like shut my body up. Dad, come on. You really need to hear this song. Okay. All right, son, let's do this. Here it is. The song that he pulled up after I'd given him the world and said, here you go. Let me know how it goes, was a song by Evan Kraft and KB. And I'm just going to read a short part of the chorus for you here. And it's got a little bit of Spanish and English mixed in. I'm not great with Spanish. The rest of my family is wonderful. I'm not. I'll do my best. It says, y todo va a estar bien. Everything will be all right. The whole world's in his hands. Your whole world's in his hands. In the darkness and the trials, he's faithful and he's true. Your whole world's in his hands. Y todo va a estar bien. That's just the chorus. There's a rap that's filtered over that by KB. That's just awesome. After I listened to the song, I immediately brought it downstairs to Amy and replayed it probably a half dozen times with the family there. And tears in my eyes as we're like playing this, not necessarily sobbing, but just sitting as I'm like playing the song out loud. And my son said, hey, come and listen to this. This is the song I found. And if you want those tears, just watch that song till the end when they're singing, he's got the whole world in his hands. And the kids are singing it with Evan Kraft. And then they start singing in Spanish. It's just awesome. See, there's something powerful about seeing prayers answered before your eyes, about bearing witness to, especially when you know there have been generations of hope and faith put into those prayers. There's something real powerful about that, and that's where those tears came from. We'll draw back to that song later, but that's what we're going to talk about today. Seeing these generations of hope, faith, and prayers answered is what we're going to talk about. From my folks playing music to gifting me music, to seeing that, how important it is in my life, and then giving my son, family, the ability to make their decisions. And here's what they bring back, is that song will be all right. That's what we're going to talk about. Seeing those generations of hope, faith, and prayers answers what we're talking about. So let's pray. God, we welcome you into today. Welcome you into what you're doing right here, right now, as I talk in my life, as it's listened to and recorded, whoever hears this, as we're listening. We ask that your presence come right now. You're God. You get to go like, I am in that room, I'm in that room, I'm in this room, all at the same time. And so that presence come all at the same time. Right now, in the name of Jesus, amen. So today you're joining me in my faith journey. So I've been spending a lot of time the last 3 years, 4 years with N.T. Wright, digesting scriptures to understand them deeper. N.T. Wright is a current day author and theologian who wrote this whole series on the New Testament. And this entire series that he wrote is called The Bible for Everyone. He breaks it down and pulls apart the Bible and says it's written for everybody to understand, so let's make it readable for everybody. So I'm using some of his thoughts to help kind of talk about today. And N.T. Wright's writings are meeting me at some like the deepest parts of who I am. The place where I love thoughtful discussion, not just for thoughtful discussion, but to see how that thoughtful discussion and how the Bible that was written 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago pulls and impacts my life today. And that's what I hope happens for us, is that the reality of that pulls in and impacts our life today. And that's my faith. It must impact today. As I dive into this word, as we dive in, it has to impact you and me today. So today we're going to do a little bit of Bible study, where Bible study meets older Bible study. So as we get going, grab a pen. And actually I want you to either take your notes out, grab a piece of paper and a pen, and write a line down the middle. On one side, write Old Testament. On the other side, write New Testament. And we're just going to follow a couple characters in these. So write Old Testament on one side, New Testament on the other, and I'll tell you which characters to filter down. This is actually something I do with my small group, as we visually write down so we see what we're following. And I want to invite you to do that today. So you got that piece of paper, line down the middle, just write Old Testament, before Jesus came, New Testament, Jesus and after, right? Old Testament, New Testament. So scriptures we're going to begin looking at is in the beginning of the book of John. Jesus has started in chapter 1, at the end of it, telling the world he is God by calling his disciples. We find ourselves in a bit of like an easy momentum build for this early faith movement. So in the New Testament, we see 3 disciples, and the first ones are Andrew, Peter, and Philip. So just write those down under the New Testament. Andrew, Peter, and Philip under the New Testament side. So Andrew starts following Jesus first, then he gets his brother Peter, and they get Philip. So after Andrew says yes, his brother Peter says, I'm coming, I'm in, and we just see this thing start to build. They find Philip, and all 3 of them right away say yes to Jesus. We're in, we're following you, we see what we're doing, Jesus. These are the first 3 disciples, and they say we're in. Then Philip goes to find his friend, the 4th. And this is one we want to spend some time thinking about. Write down Nathaniel after Philip. So the first 3, and then Nathaniel. Circle Nathaniel. That's who we're thinking about, Nathaniel. Circle him. And then we get our first momentum, like stop. We skid a little bit here, or we get doubt from a skeptic. Let's read about it. John chapter 1, verse 43 through 46. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, follow me. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethesda. Philip found Nathanael and told him, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. He's the one. Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. Come and see, said Philip. So we see here, Philip comes in hot. He's just so excited. He's pumped up. I know friends and people and family like this. They just get so excited about what God is doing, what the Lord is doing. Maybe you know some of them too. And they said, we found him. He's the one. He's the one we've been waiting for. He's the one that Moses wrote about. He's the one who the prophets have all wrote about for thousands of years. He's the one. Come on. It's Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael, remember you circled him? He says, wait, where did he come from? Nah, I'll pass. Nothing good comes from that poor population of a couple hundred people. Nothing good comes from there. So here we meet our first skeptic. Let's continue reading. See what happens. John chapter 1, verse 47 to 49 now. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, here is a true Israelite, in whom there is nothing false. How do you know me? Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. So somehow Nathanael continues and goes with Philip, even though he gave first doubt. He said, I'm going to come with you. And when Jesus sees Nathanael, he looks at him, and he perhaps quotes a psalm from Psalm 32 to him and speaks directly into Nathanael's heart. And he says, here is a true Israelite in whom there is nothing false. Quick stop. Did you just see that God said, here's a true Israelite in whom there's nothing false, to one who was not quick to believe? To one who doubted and said, prove it to me? Does that resonate with anybody? God said, here's a true Israelite, to one who doubted. I think your and my doubt's okay. Because God looked at him and said, you are a true Israelite. And then Nathanael says, don't pretend you know me. You don't know me. I'm wondering if Nathanael was thinking that maybe you set up by Philip. Maybe he said, my friend went ahead of me and told Jesus about me. But Jesus answers, Nathanael, but I do know you. I was with you right where you were before your friend Philip came. You were under a fig tree and I saw you there. See, that small bit of prophetic power of Jesus showing a glimpse of his godness was enough for Nathanael to believe. After Nathanael's profession of belief saying, you are the King of Israel, Jesus says something I want to study. It's up on the screen. He continues and goes, Jesus said, you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You shall see greater things than that. He then added, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. In other words, Jesus said, you think you saw something? You think you saw something by me being with you before your friend came? Yes, that was my kingdom at work. But buckle up. Let me tell you, you are going to see, and in fact, are seeing right now what looks like when full access of heaven meets earth. Outside of this face value of the statement by Jesus, what is he saying here to Nathanael? It's actually quite beautiful. It's easy for me to say, I got it, Jesus. You're telling Nathanael that he will get a vision and see angels attending you. Sure, that's the first blush. But John, as he writes his whole book, he never minces his words. He's always purposeful, John is, about what he puts in his book. So why did John record this conversation specifically with Nathanael? And why did he specifically write these words from Jesus? This is actually much deeper than Jesus simply saying, I can give you visions of heaven and prove to you that angels will tend me. It's a lot deeper. See, Jesus is drawing Nathanael to a story about Nathanael's forefathers that Nathanael would have known. It's a story that came 40 generations earlier, and one that the current generation, that the Nathanael generation of Israelites held dear, and one that they were placing their daily hope, faith, and prayers in. So let's look at that story. You remember when I said we're going to do a Bible study on a Bible study? We just did the New Testament versions when Jesus came in after. And now let's see how the Old Testament version, 2,000 years prior, fits in. So this is, if you're taking notes on characters on the Old Testament side, this is what we're going to fit in. So let's go to Genesis and read about where the story relates. Genesis chapter 28, it's up on the screen, 10 through 17. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Sound familiar? There above it stood the Lord, and he said to Jacob, I am the Lord your God, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land in which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, and will watch over you where you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? There is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Okay, so on the Old Testament side of your paper, write Abraham, right next to him, grandfather. Write Isaac, right next to him, write dad. Then write Jacob, son, and circle him. So God had spoken to Abraham, the grandfather, then he spoke to the dad, Isaac, and now he spoke to Jacob. And this is the story of Jacob hearing that. In verse 12, we see the same verbiage that Jesus used with Nathanael. It's the exact same, actually. It's the origin of that language when Jesus tells Nathanael, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. This vision has a stairway that connects earth to heaven, and God speaks to Jacob from heaven about his promise for earth. And the words that God speaks is a continuation or a repeat of his promise that he gave Jacob's father and grandfather, Abraham and Isaac. It's the exact same words. God's promise didn't change. He promised land or home and a way to provide for family, descendants, blessing, and to be with Jacob. To be with Jacob. This vision from God, the time when God spoke directly to Jacob, came after Jacob fled his homeland and family. Jacob was running away from his twin brother who had sworn out loud to kill him. Jacob was fleeing for his life, and he was fleeing for life as he had received the generational blessing from his dad, the blessing that should have been for his twin brother Esau, but that Jacob received. Jacob just received this lineage blessing from his father for a promised land, fruitful descendants, and a full life. And now he was running for his life without anything to his name except those words and those promises. Let's stop and think about that for a moment. Can we just appreciate the highs and lows that would have been on Jacob? Can we imagine like the euphoria of being the one to receive the blessing that their family held so dear and so true? The blessing that came from God to his grandfather, Abraham. The blessing that came and was repeated by God to his father, Isaac. And that same blessing that was now given to him. I'm sure that this tribe of people held this word blessing from God so sacred, so dear to them. It was probably like the constant water cooler conversation was around this blessing. How would it be fulfilled? Were they living in the blessing now? When would it be fulfilled? How could this eldest son, the twin brother of Jacob, Esau, be so evil, live in rebellion, and be expected to receive that blessing? That just might not have made sense to them. How could Jacob, who's the younger brother, but how would he handle this? And then Jacob gets all of these big emotions, all of this like continued lineage conversation, blessing spoken to him. The promises were spoken to him. The most prized possession these people had, period, was given to him, words from God. And he had to leave. He left without anything. No people, no possessions, no land, no flocks, nothing. He was living in this promise unfulfilled. I can imagine him crying out to God and saying, "This is a blessing, really? Are you serious? I'd rather have food or water right now, or I'd rather have rest, or I'd rather have my family back. Take care of me now. Don't give me words. Those are empty. I need help now." Enter God. What does God bring to this wandering man who's fleeing a murder covenant spoken by his oldest twin brother? God brings himself. He brings himself. He brings his word. He repeats the promises that were spoken Jacob's grandfather and father, but he says them to Jacob. And he not only repeats those promises, but he gives Jacob something more. He gives him a look at how those promises would be fulfilled. He gives Jacob an image on how heaven and earth connect. The stairway shows Jacob that God has full access to earth and can and will bring the fullness of heaven to earth. Now look at verse 16 in Genesis. When Jacob woke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He said, "God was with me, and I had no idea." See, right in the middle of Jacob's fear, loneliness, isolation, and unfulfilled promises, God was with Jacob. This was such a moving encounter with the Lord that Jacob took the stone under his head, he built a pillar, and he named this area House of God, or Bethel, or Bethel. And this place, Bethel, would be a place of worship for the Israelites for the next 1,000 years. It would be known as a place of worship and as a place where God would speak, as a place where God would call his people back to. And that name for the house of God, where God was worshipped, Bethel, you probably have heard Bethel, Bethel worship, Bethel seminary, Bethel school. That word is still, and that place is still having, that word is still having an impact on our worship today. So let's go back to the New Testament for Nathanael. So the Israelites of Jesus' day, with Nathanael, would all have known about the vision that Jacob received. It was a pillar moment in their community's faith walk where God confirmed his promise for a third generation in a row, where God met Jacob in his destitution and he gave him a glimpse of what it looked like when heaven meets earth. Remember that conversation that Jesus had with Nathanael when he called Nathanael to be his disciple? Do you remember how shocked Nathanael was when he heard the minor prophecy that Jesus gave him about seeing him under the tree before they were introduced to each other? I don't think we can imagine the depths of awe that Nathanael would have felt when Jesus tied that small act of prophecy or showing his godness to this larger scale in verse 51, where he says, let's pull it back on the screen, where he says to Nathanael, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man, on me. Jesus is telling Nathanael that now is the time when you get to see the 40 generations since the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob be fulfilled. Now is the time when you get to bear witness to the promises that God made to Jacob about all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. And that night of vision, I'm it, Jesus is saying. I am the fullness of the link between heaven and earth. The angels do my bidding, and you are now seeing God brought to earth. It's me. God promised your people, I am with you and will watch over you where you go, and I will not leave you until I do what I promised. Well, I'm telling you now that I am with you, I am God, and I am doing what he promised. We could blow Nathanael away. Do you remember when I said that John doesn't mince words? This story of Jesus calling Nathanael is the start of John's recording of the life of Jesus. At the end of the book of John, John tells us and his readers the entirety of the reason he wrote this book. John 20:31 says, these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The Jewish audience reading these words would have known the depth of Jesus telling Nathanael that he would see the heavens open, angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. I skipped right over the importance of reading that so many times. Now we get to see that fulfilled. How does this ancient story about Jesus meeting an even more ancient prophecy reach in and affect our lives today? It has to. It has to. These stories, these biblical truths have to have impact today. So let's talk about it. I think there are 3 questions that this now brings up that meet you and I. Let's look at what those questions bring up. It starts with, do you believe? Do you believe what John is wanting you to see as he writes these words, that Jesus is the Son of God? It all starts here. Either he is or he isn't. I think there's different parts in this process. There's different parts in this process of belief. There's this initial belief. Do you believe that Jesus is God? Some of you here that are listening to this are going, oh my gosh, I actually don't. Now I do. I see God. I see that Jesus was God. Now it's the time to respond like Nathanael and say, Jesus, you are the Son of God. If that's you, say, God, I believe. God, I believe in you, and I want you, God, to come and be part of my life forever, and I need you. Say that. And then let somebody at Mercy know. Reach out to staff at Mercy, let them know so they can say, let's start figuring this out together. And they'll welcome that conversation. That's the start. But then there are those of us that maybe have believed for a while. This continuing or this deeper belief now is for us. So some of us here believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but desperately want more of what Jesus has for us in our life. See, God called Nathanael, who was already waiting on the Messiah, to a deeper relationship with him. God said, follow me. Some of us have had or currently have a relationship with God. The Lord right now is calling you again to follow me. You know it because Jesus is talking to you and your heart's beating and you go, that is from the Lord. He's pulling at your thoughts. He's pulling at your emotions right now, just like he did to Nathanael. If that's you, say, God, I want more of you. I want to follow you. I want to follow you more. Show me how to do that. And then tell somebody in your faith walk with Jesus that God is calling you into a deeper level. And then be asking God, what does that mean? He'll tell you. The second question we need to ask, or that we need to look at, or that these stories bring up, is do we need confirmation that God is with us? Do you need confirmation that God is with you? Do you need to see and to say, just like Jacob, when he woke, that God is surely in this place? Remember the song Be All Right by Evan Kraft? Here's a verse. It says, yeah, Father, you say everything's going to be all right. My circumstances say that I won't last through the night. I need your word to hold me now. Need you to pull me through. I need a miracle, a breakthrough. I need you. See, See, some of us are disoriented. We're wandering like Jacob because of perhaps our sin, because of somebody else's sin. We need to rest our head and let God speak to us. And then we say, God, please speak to me. Is that anybody? If that's you, God's saying, I'm with you. I'm with you. Third question, third and last. Do you have hope unfulfilled? That's a deep question. Let's look again into the song, Be All Right by Evan Kraft. They say you hold the whole universe in your hand, but my world's falling apart like it's made of sand. Am I small enough to slip through the cracks? Can you take my broken pieces and put them back? Give me faith to believe you are on my side. Open my eyes to see you working in my life. Let the past remind me you never fail. Tell my soul it as well. Do you have a hope unfulfilled? Have you received a promise from the Lord that maybe was a continuation from generations like it was for Jacob? Perhaps it was a new promise to you. It's just for you, and you're in the in-between. It was powerful when you received it, but you haven't seen it happen. You're in the in-between. Do you need God to reaffirm his promise to you? This promise could be something as impactful as a verbal word from the Lord, or it could have been something that he told you about staying close to him, about following him, and you just haven't continued to search for hope. You haven't been holding on to that. Maybe at one time we're given that hope through another preacher, another friend, a moment of quiet journaling, but that seems so far ago, so long ago, and now it's you're sitting and you're unfulfilled. I think God is reminding you of that right now. And every time you remember, you think, is this hope still true? It was for Jacob, and it will be for you and I. That hope is true. We're going to close here by, again, repeating the song or the chorus from that song. Y todo va a estar bien. Everything will be all right. The whole world's in his hands. Your whole world's in his hands. In the darkness and the trials, he's faithful and he's true. Your whole world's in his hands. Y todo va a estar bien.